Good morning, everyone. Um, Nice to see you in this new year. I just want to mention before I start my talk that today is January 6th. It's the 3-year anniversary of the mob attack of the Capitol building. And I've also been reading in the paper that there's been a lot of effort being done by those who are responsible or their followers to try to make it seem as though it was a patriotic act and that people were just exercising their patriotic duty. So, and more people are believing that with all the evidence to the contrary. So, what does that say about our human nature, but also about our own minds? And I think it's worth saying that in our own minds, we've created all kinds of false narratives about what we think is real and what isn't real. Let's see. Okay, now stick. So, anyway, we fool ourselves. So, I think we have to have a little bit of compassion for being misguided, even though in this case it might have bigger consequences, but not necessarily. So anyway, just encourage everybody to exercise their patriotic duty by going to vote rather than going to storm the Capitol building, and vote for those who you believe, view of reality is in conformity with yours. So today I'm going to continue my talks about the ox-herding pictures, and the one today is riding the ox home. It's the 6th stage, and all of the pictures are on the wall just outside of this room. And the last time the person tamed the ox, which represents our true self, Buddha nature. Yeah. And now the person is riding the ox home. Okay. So the struggle is over. And the gain and loss have also disappeared into emptiness. The herd's person sings a simple song and plays a country child's tune on their flute. And they ride on the ox and look up into the blue sky. When someone calls out, they don't turn around, and when somebody tugs on the sleeve, they don't stop. So in other words, not responding to praise and blame, just being free of it. So the person is now the person empty of oneself. And the ox is also empty of itself. And the empty person leisurely plays the flute on the back of the empty ox, who walks along peacefully and slowly. So it says that they're coming home together, playing the melody of the unborn. So that's what Bankei, I think, said, that all you have to do is just realize that unborn state. That state, if you're not born, you don't die either. So what is that state? Of course, everybody's going to die, but that's in the relative world. We're talking about in the absolute sense. Each moment, if we fully engage it, there's no birth, no death. It's just whatever it is. And even when we die, if we fully engage death, there's no birth and no death. So the herdsman or person sinks into the ox and the ox into the person, where the heart of the ox and the person and the world have been led back into the concentration of one nature and are concentrated in it. So he sinks into the mountain and the mountain sinks into him. We have a koan that says the donkey looks at the well and the well looks at the donkey. And that's case 52 of the Book of Equanimity, which kind of touches on the stage of the Ox-Herding Pictures. And the case goes like this. And Sozan once asked Tokujozo, the Buddha's true body is like the vast sky. It's conforming to things and manifesting shapes is like the moon in the water. How can this principle of conforming be expressed? And Toku said, it's like the donkey seeing the mirror. And Joza remarked, well said, but that's only 80% of it. And Toku rejoined, what about you? What would you say? And he says, the well sees the donkey. So the donkey sees the well sees the donkey. I'll talk a little bit about that, but so I remember somebody once asked my teacher, Maizumi Roshi, do you ever think that humans will figure out how the brain's works? And he said, I think the brain is using humans to figure out how it works. So you can turn these things around. Is a donkey looking at the well's looking at the donkey. What does that mean? So the donkey looks at the well, that's an accomplished state. Where your mind is just like a mirror, so that whatever comes in front of it is reflected. And we don't put up filters, we don't put up projections, we don't put up judgments. But even there's something that Toku was holding on to when he said that. So if there's a donkey looking at the well, there's still an idea of the donkey or the idea of self. So if the well looks at the donkey, then that pulls even that away. Nothing to really hold on to. But then according to circumstances, things arise. If everything is pure, where do all of the mountains, rivers, and the stars come from? How do they arise? So that's what a mandala is, a container for bringing all of these opposites together, the absolute and the relative, light and dark, affirmation, negation. And the life, of each one of us is a mandala to bring together all the polarities into a unifying principle. See, one of the ways that we learn is by parable or analogy. But what happens when there's nothing to compare it to? So riding the ox home, are there any analogies? No? Like, the old story that somebody asked another person, have you ever eaten a rattlesnake meat? And they said, yes, I have. And they said, well, what did it taste like? Well, it tastes like rattlesnake meat. Yeah, but tell me, kind of like chicken. But it's not really chicken. Everything that we don't know what it tastes like chicken. So you have to have the experience in order to know what we're talking about. Analogy doesn't point to it, That's what we say in Zen. It's the finger pointing at the moon. It's not the moon. But we can still learn by it. We can learn, and maybe, the donkey sees the well might mean something to you, and the well sees the donkey might mean something else. But is that it? So this Buddha nature, this unity, is present in all beings, and they all appear as Buddha nature. But in this stage, the oneness of the person and the ox reign, which is a unity of self and other, or unity of person and the world. An old Zen master calls this snow lying in a silver bowl. You might have heard that expression, or a white heron hidden in the light of the bright moon. See, that it's hard to distinguish them. Or even, if you mix sugar and salt together, you can't distinguish it. But so, together they seem the same, but apart they're different. So all is one nature here, mountains and rivers, sky and earth, moon and stars, and all are the genuine face of the old master. So when we let go, all is fresh and open. And there's no right and wrong or dust or air. There's a verse that was presented by Tozan Ryokai. It's called the Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi. And it starts out, the teaching of thusness has been intimately communicated by Buddhas and ancestors. So the teaching of thusness, it's a word that we make up to mean just this moment. Now you have it, so keep it well. Everybody has this thusness. Maybe you heard this, I think I've mentioned it before, when Bernie Glassman was giving a talk at Naropa one time, somebody said, wanted him to explain to them how you stay present in the here and now, which is thusness. And he said, everybody who's not in the here and now, please raise your hand. So how do you learn? What does it prevent us? We have some kind of an idea. So now you have it, so keep it well. Filling a silver bowl with snow, hiding a heron in the moonlight. Together they seem the same, but apart they are different. And the meaning is not in the words. So the first stage of the Ox-Herding Pictures, the desire for profit and fear of loss flare up like a flaming conflagration and Views of right and wrong arise in opposition to one another like spears on a battlefield. But in this stage, the struggle is over, and gain and loss have come to nothing. A peace is celebrated in which, the former confusion in our mind or the enemies in our mind are transformed into close friends who speak to each other and go for a walk together in the mountain or by the side of the water. Self and other have become one. So that includes, our internal voices. One of the biggest sicknesses in our society is our own self-criticism, thinking that we're inadequate, thinking that we're unlovable, thinking that we're not good enough. And my Zen Roshi used to always say to appreciate yourself. So what are these voices, that tend to criticize oneself? Are they true? Or is it just a habit pattern? And so the point is, at this stage, we've let go of many of our habit patterns that don't really serve us. Maybe we thought it was useful when we were a child, and we said that I can't do this, I can't do that, otherwise I won't be safe. And so it becomes ingrained in our body and we carry it forward. So previously there were many questions and errors and criticisms, and we tormented ourselves with erroneous opinions. And as we continued to practice year by year, many questions were put before us at different stages in our training. So the question of what's true and what isn't was hard to approach, difficult to understand. And we went through hard struggles day and night, getting to the bottom of our training, whether it's koans or just sitting, and we have to overcome all of that. And when our heart is freed of gain and loss, at the end of the struggle, the self sinks into the other and the other into the self as this unencumbered heart. Everything is one in the unity of the original self. So there's no worries anymore. This is a great awakening. But just remember, this is the sixth stage. There's 10 of them. Yeah. And it says in the commentaries that the herds person at this stage doesn't turn away from poverty or low rank or fight against slander and contempt. And whether one is fortunate or misfortunate in everyday life, it doesn't deter him from the path. As Master Hakun said, coming or going, we never leave home. He also said, singing and dancing are the voice of the Dharma. So, wherever we are, whatever we hear, whatever we say, is the voice of the Dharma. But then if somebody pulls your sleeve, you don't turn, you don't get attached to it. So the way it's described, it sounds like a truly wonderful state. Because it's the sixth stage, there's still a big trap here. That's because there's an ox which is walking along smoothly on its own, and a self which is looking at that ox. That self is happy, gazing at the ox, which is the true self, and thinking how gentle it has become. So everything's so gentle, you proclaim you've reached a wonderful state, and those who hear that admire it as something worthy. And they also think that person must be something special. So, and because that person is something special, and I'm not special, I shouldn't practice, because I'll never reach that state. So it's not very encouraging, is it? So the result, is not very useful. So once you've come this far, you have to urge yourself to practice further. As one student asked a master, how should I accomplish myself in practice? He says, first you need to practice 10 years. And then he said, well, then what after that? Then you have to practice another 10 years. And he said, then what after that? Practice another 10 years. So the Buddha is still practicing. So here's a verse that goes with this stage. It starts out like this. Slowly and steadily the herdsman rides home on the ox. In the spreading evening mist, his flute sounds far in the distance. Beat by beat and verse by verse, the boundless feeling of the herdsman rings out. Listening to this song, there is no need to say how things are with the herdsman. So slowly and steadily, the herdsman rides home on the ox. The word for slowly in the original text refers to something connected and stretching for some distance. Here you've mounted the ox, which is your true self, and you're slowly proceeding to return to your native village with no end yet in sight. And riding home means that you're trying to return. It also implies that you haven't done that. So what keeps you from coming back? It's because there's still a sense of a self that's looking at the ox, a self that says, this is my true nature. So in the spreading evening mist, his flute sounds far in the distance. So the sound of the flute salutes the evening mist, note by note. It can be heard so clearly, but that flute, like the sound of a foreigner playing in a strange land, brings a tinge of melancholy. And then beat by beat and verse by verse, the boundless feeling of the herdsman rings out. So with each song and each note, there's an infinite savoring. This is so because every clap of the hand and every footstep or in each blade of grass the true self appears. You're able to experience directly these things without logical thinking and manipulation of concepts. The last line says, listening to this song, there's no need to say how things are with the herdsman. So what is that really like, you might ask? In ancient China, there were two friends named Hakuga and Shoshiki. So Hakuga was a master of the Chinese lute. And when Hakuga played the lute, Shoshika would discern the state of his mind and his disposition by listening carefully to the sound and the tone. So it's not necessarily to verbalize what's within. There's a way of understanding perfectly while being silent. I just read something on the internet. I think it was Arthur Rubinstein. He was a great classical musician. And when he was 90 years old, he was still practicing 3-4 hours a day. And somebody asked him, why are you practicing so much at the age of 90? And he says, I sense some improvement. That's good. Not never giving up. Just this last week, I was reminded of a session that we did years ago with Shishin Roshi. So he died almost 30 years ago. So it was before that. And the Zen Center being in Los Angeles, there were a few interesting celebrities who participated, and one of them wanted to have a session just for celebrities so that they would be able to not be objects of interest or curiosity at a regular session. And so we arranged one, and it was an actor named Michael O'Keefe who's quite involved in Zen, and his wife at the time was Bonnie Raitt. And she came to the session, and they invited David Crosby of Crosby, Stills and Nash, and his wife Jan were there, and some other people were there. But I was holding private interviews, and David Crosby came to see me. And he said to me, he and I were the same age. He just died this last year, actually. And he said to me, I wish I had done as much with my life as you've done with yours. And it kind of blew me away. I said, really? I wish I'd done as much with my life as you've done with yours. So when he said that, I didn't think of it at the time, but telling this anecdote of Rubinstein, I sensed that there was some improvement there. He was notorious for being a difficult person. And so he said, I wish I'd done, in other words, not that what I did, he's a famous musician and composed and performed some marvelous songs, but maybe he felt that maybe I'd like to feel a little more peaceful in my life. Maybe that's what he sensed from practice. So